welcome to everybody. Before we get started, I would just love to acknowledge that VocalEye is broadcasting to you all this evening from the unceded, ancestral, and occupied territories of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And we're all joining through the magic of Zoom. So I would love for you to each take the opportunity in your own time to acknowledge the lands that you are settled on. And I know where we are here in British Columbia and across Turtle Island, we are feeling the heaviness of the 215 children that were discovered in a mass grave in Kamloops. And my understanding is that there are projects underway, excavations, I guess, underway across Canada at other residential schools, because this is sadly a common thing. So I think that we will be devastated over and over by this. But I think it's important to acknowledge that this is a part of our history, and we can't start to make amends until we acknowledge that. So that being said, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Amy. I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator here at VocalEye. I'm also a member of the community. I have very low vision. So I do my best to try and navigate through as we all do in our lives, especially when using technology. And it's Wednesday. It's welcome to another Wednesday evening, June the 9th. This is our 47th virtual VocalEye event. And tonight we're going to explore opera at the movies. So what is that going to look like a little bit? I'm going to get into that in just a moment as I welcome in our special guest. But first off, I just want to give a big shout out and acknowledgement to our donors who have helped to create this amazing program, which we are so privileged to bring to you all. And so we have some foundation grants, of course, but also folks who have dug deep into their own pockets and made donations. So there is always a link that'll be posted in the chat, and so you can find it there, but you can also find a link on our website, vocaleye.ca. And if you have the capacity to make a donation, we absolutely appreciate it, but it's not obligatory. We offer this programming free of charge to make sure that folks in our community have access to the arts, right? Well, at a time where we don't have in-person physical access to the arts. So, and just a reminder to folks that we do something very different every week. So some weeks it's a virtual tour, some weeks it's an opera night, some weeks it's a described play. And you'll find something different every week. So to that end, next week, just letting you know what's coming up on the 16th of June, is Flying in the Dark, which is approximately a 75-minute a storytelling event by Kim Kilpatrick, who is in Ottawa. So many of you know Kim, and Kim presented this story with the CCB in Toronto several months ago, but she's going to make a recurrence for us. So that's on June the 16th. So I hope you'll all join us for that. And on June the 23rd, we're going to feature something called The Art of Making the Invisible Visible. And we have a couple of scientists from NASA joining us because there are these incredible photos that have been taken from the Chandra X-ray Observatory. And we're going to talk a bit about space with a scientist and with an artist who illustrates space. So if you like space, it'll be interesting stuff. Okay, friends, I've put my housekeeping hat, taken it off, and put on my event hat tonight. I want to just welcome to the space Julia Bonnet, who is an opera singer, an opera aficionado, an expert. I don't know how many things you can add to the title, Julia's title, but also a community member and the newest community reporter for AMI's Kelly and Company. So welcome to the space, Julia.
Thank you, Amy.
So happy to have you on this side of the camera. Does that feel weird? Like this on this side of the space. And you've been so interactive with some of the programming that we've offered. So it's really nice to have you here.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to do this, and really hoping that, I can share something that people will enjoy and continue to enjoy.
Yeah. And for some, this will be like a brand new experience for them in terms of what is opera all about. I know for me, I don't know a lot about opera. So let's just start with the small stuff and talk about who you are and what your relationship is to the opera.
Well, I'm a fan of vocal music, period. And, always loved to sing. So when I was, an older teenager, I took lessons and then eventually ended up going and pursuing vocal training at university. I got degrees in music. And then I pursued a career as a singer. And that you know, that was a wonderful, wonderful learning opportunity, and I enjoyed opera a lot. I did sort of mostly stay in Vancouver and in this side of the country. So I wasn't like an international opera, you know, jet setting from opera house to opera house and all over the place. But I did sing in with Vancouver Opera and various regional companies around here. And I also did music theater, and I also did a little bit of theater, and I did concert work and whatnot. So I do have you know, a history with performing. And then I ended up doing more teaching as my sort of, you know, as I just got older, and also as my vision started to deteriorate a little bit, I found it easier to do. And now I'm, you know, sort of here to share with you, and and also hoping to share my enthusiasm about music more broadly with whoever will listen to me, basically.
Isn't that how it feels sometimes? Whoever's out there listening, I have something I want to share, and it's a great platform to be able to offer that to folks. I guess let's dip our toes into some opera, foundational opera history. And again, I don't want to overwhelm folks with stuff because there's a lot. And you know, we may do another event like this as we progress through the VocalEye virtual VocalEye platform events. But let's ease into this gently, Julia.
Okay.
Give us a little bit of entry to opera, a little history.
Well, there's a lot. There's a lot of opera history out there, and I just thought maybe it might amuse people to know that the first people who actually wrote opera were Italians, sort of the like early 1600s. And these were a bunch of noblemen in Italy, in Florence, actually, who, you know, they loved music, and they wanted some drama with their music. And so they were called the Camerata. So this is a group. And it may interest you to know that they were also apparently the first group to write down the rules of soccer, or what was known as soccer at the time, and which was a very different game than our soccer. There was a lot of punching and hitting and like all kinds of violence that would not be permitted now. But in any case, those were the guys who sort of started opera. And so, you know, we have sort of 400 years of opera history going on. I also thought it might be kind of nice for people to know just some basic vocabulary that I'll be using tonight, including words like aria. Like, what is an aria? And an aria is basically the Italian word for song. And we're going to be featuring some arias tonight, but we're also going to be featuring some duets. And as you might imagine, that is two people singing. And then trios and all bigger groups also sing in opera. But essentially, opera is storytelling with music. It's very basic, you know. It's just that it's meant to be sung to grand stories, usually big stories. And it sort of started out with, let's say, the stories of gods, goddesses, noblemen, etc., etc. But over the years, as time went on, it became also the story of regular people. And that's, I think, when opera got really exciting.
So regular people, I'm a regular person. I hope I'm a regular person, but I've always had this thought process that opera wasn't going to be for me, because I'm not really the kind of person who enjoys like getting dressed in black tie stuff, and you know that the tickets were too expensive, and you know that just felt like there were so many barriers, and that it was created for, you know, let's be honest, kind of rich snobby people. That was always the kind of the air of opera that I got. But you're gonna change my thinking on that, I think. So what can you share with us about that?
Yeah, well, you know, again, in the old days, like back in the Baroque times, let's say in the like early 1700s, late 1600s, it sort of was mostly for people that were nobility, let's say. However, it wasn't a genteel or elite experience. It was more like being at a baseball game, quite frankly, because there would be long stretches of time where people would not really pay attention to what was going on stage. they'd be drinking, they'd be chatting. If they were in a box, they could like close these shutters and actually have an affair. And they brought little barbecues with them and cooked their own food. It's probably why opera houses were always burning down back then. But anyway, that and the non-electrical lights, that just candle light, right? But along about, let's say, the time when the Industrial Revolution started to kind of take hold, and the French Revolution even before, it started to kind of become accessible to more people. More people had the money, let's say, to go to the theater. And so they wanted to see stories about them. And also the aristocracy was beginning to be challenged socially. So the French Revolution really changed a lot in that way. And so as time went on, the stories became less about those people and more about like the real people of the street. And so everybody would go to see it. Now, that being said, now the people in the audience, there has been a history of, say, treating it a bit like going to church, like you have to get dressed up and it's all dark and you have to clap at the right places and all that kind of stuff. But it certainly didn't start out that way. And I think, especially here in Vancouver, there's a lot more of a relaxed attitude to what you wear and all the rest of it. And I think in the opera world in general, people are realizing that, if you want to keep an audience, you have to make it accessible to them. On the price of tickets, I should point out that probably you can spend about the same on an opera ticket as you do on a Canucks ticket, or even less. So if we're talking money that way, it's not that much different.
Right. It all depends on what your priorities are. So, okay, I appreciate that. And one of the other things that you and I had talked about too is sometimes I find, obviously, I guess I shouldn't say obviously, but opera to me is always feels like it's in another language, that it's not in English, which makes sense to me. So sometimes I would feel like I can't really enjoy it because I'm not going to understand the words of it. And I know that some folks who can see have access to surtitles, right, which are like closed captions in a live opera for folks who don't know what surtitles are. And the other part of that was the technique of the singing, which you had talked to me about in our prep for this, about how the singing is different between opera and like modern day singing when you have a microphone in front of your face, and how that could also sort of change maybe how you auditorily experience it. So maybe you can share that a little bit with us.
Yeah, well, for sure, one has to realize that opera came of age, of course, before there were microphones. We're used to the sound of a very intimate sound of a microphone right there. And so that's a different sound entirely from what you'll hear at the opera, where, the technique that was developed so that the voice could be heard above an orchestra, through an orchestra, without the help of a microphone, which of course didn't exist. So there is this acoustic phenomenon that happens when a person sings with an opera technique. And there's something called vocal science, which goes into this in more detail. But essentially, it's as the operas stopped being just in the realm of, say, small salons in the castles or whatever, the nobility, and they went into bigger and bigger spaces, the vocal technique had to develop so that people would learn how to sing in such a way that it would cut through. And the way that was done is that, the back of the throat was opened up and people learned how to use the power of their breath. And then all that combined with these amazing acoustics in an opera hall or a concert hall. And then all of a sudden, boom, there's something called a singer's formant, which is an acoustic term for basically an enhanced harmonic. And that harmonic is sort of booming out there in a range above the orchestra. So it's in a range that the orchestra does not normally play in. And so you can hear the voice, right? But when you have that big sound like that and they're using diction that's very, very clear so people can understand it, it sounds kind of highfalutin and fancy dancy, but it's just an acoustic necessity that sort of became an artistic sensibility. So it's not meant to sound elitist or anything like that. Of course, the language barrier is a barrier. However, most people, even if the opera is sung in English, most people would probably find it difficult to understand just because the diction is so formalized and kind of exaggerated. So you're meant to go to the opera more than once and you're meant to know the stories. And honestly, you don't have to understand every line or every word to appreciate the stories, the power, the predicament, the themes, all of this that exists in opera.
Okay. Thank you for some of the foundational knowledge. As we transition into what we're going to share this evening, I'll just let folks know that what we've got planned for you is a series of clips. So we've got 4 fairly notable movies, and they're not described clips, so I'm gonna just set them up and then we'll play them and we'll listen to how opera is used in storytelling in this film and television genre, which is a very different genre than the opera genre is, right? And then we'll unpack a little bit about that, and then we'll set up a similar clip of the same aria, or the same duet or the same piece of music from the stage perspective of the opera, and have some conversation, some great conversation. And this is where I welcome folks to raise their hands and put questions in the chat if you have questions. Stop us, not obviously during the clips, but as we're having discussions, if you have questions and you want to ask them and find out more about opera. We've got Julia with us, and it's such a joy to have somebody who knows so much about opera to be able to answer our questions. So I'm really excited to get into this. I'm not going to tell you all of the movies until we come to them because I don't want to spoil it. But the first movie we're going to look at is The Shawshank Redemption, which is one of my favorite movies of all times. And I should just say that I started saying this in the social bit, which is I didn't recognize until we started having this discussion with Julia offered opera at the movie as an entry point to the discussion, how many times I have heard opera in the movies, because they kind of sneak it in there on you. And unless you are really paying attention, it's a part of the overall, it blends in with the sound effects and the acting, and it's a part of the overall storytelling. So you don't often recognize. But what it does for me is there are pieces we'll experience tonight where you'll say to yourself, oh, I've heard that before. I've heard that before. And likely you've heard it in a movie if you haven't been to the opera. So I think this is a really great place to just jump right on in. So we're gonna start with the Shawshank Redemption clip, and we're gonna play that, but I'm gonna unpack it. I'm gonna set it up for folks because again, there's no description in these. So the Shawshank Redemption, if you're not familiar, is a prison environment. It's a prison, 1950s, and this clip features prisoner Andy Dufresne, who is in the warden's office, and he's been tasked to take a pile of books and a pile of records that are going to build their library, prison library, and sort through them. Of course, the cop that is supposed to have supervised him has decided to, and I'm going to just say it, gone to take a poop. That's what he's gone to go use the bathroom, and he's sitting on the toilet reading a Jughead magazine. So Andy's got this time to kill. And in a moment of defiance, as Andy's looking through this record collection, he picks one out and he carefully, tenderly, with love, dusts it off. He obviously is a sophisticated human, and he appreciates this kind of music. And he knows that he's in a world of possibly unsophisticated criminals. So he locks the doors to the office, and he pumps up the PA system, and he puts the record on for all of the prisoners in the prison yard and throughout the prison to hear. And of course, as the camera sweeps through, we see sort of folks that are in the infirmary, and the guards come to attention, and the hundreds and hundreds of prisoners in the yard stand still to listen to this beautiful music, which I would imagine for many of them has not been something they've ever experienced before. And of course, they're wondering where this music is coming from. And then we hear the voice of Morgan Freeman, who plays a character called Red, talk about his experience listening to this music as a prisoner in the prison yard. Of course, this really ticks off the warden, and the warden appears at his office and tells Andy to turn the music down, turn it off, basically. And Andy again defies him and turns it up. And they break down the door, and that's the clip we're going to see. So you're going to hear some of the sound effects in the background, you're going to hear some of the dialogue, but that's the world that we're entering. And after we come back after this clip, we're going to talk about the aria, the storytelling in the movies, and then we'll play the clip of the actual opera itself in the same aria. So Rick, if you would please play that clip. That was a clip from the Shawshank Redemption. Boy, it goes by fast. And I was just thinking to myself, I got to watch that movie again. I know AMI has played it with description. So, stay tuned to AMI if you're interested in that movie being played again. So Julia, let's unpack some of this. I can't see you, but I can't hear you.
Hang on.
The magic of Zoom,
there
right?
I am. I think I did that to my, oh no, now I'm off again. I don't think I'm doing that. Hang on. Somebody fiddling with my camera.
It's the Phantom of the Opera.
It's the Phantom of the Opera. That's right.
Which, by the way, folks,
okay.
my virtual background is the Paris Opera House. If anybody was wondering what my virtual background was, it's like golds and red velvets and like opulence that you wouldn't believe, but it's beautiful. Anyways, so your opera background, and I have a film and television background. I worked in the movie industry for years. Is going to make a good combination. And folks, again, I welcome you to raise your hands and join in the conversation if you have questions. But first off, I want to just talk about the storytelling nature of this particular piece, and the way in which Red, who's one of the characters that speaks about the fact that this piece made every last man at Shawshank feel free. So the power of this music. So talk to me a little bit about the power of opera and how it's, from the opera perspective, how it's used in storytelling in this particular movie.
Well, it's funny because, and I'll talk a little bit more as I set this up in the context of the opera, but this is one of those pieces that everybody remembers in the opera world, let's say, because it's so gorgeous, right? It's so beautiful and pure. And I have a feeling that is part of its appeal in terms of storytelling in this context in the prison, because as you know, Andy Dufresne is unjustly convicted in this movie. And the idea that on some level, despite what any of these people have done, there's a purity that they can access. There's a beauty, and I think that in some way, that's what this scene is meant to do, is to kind of say, I don't care who you are, I don't care what you've done, but you can appreciate this beauty and this, as Morgan Freeman says, this freedom that this beauty provides you despite the external circumstances you find yourself in. It's wonderful.
Yeah, there's if we had the privilege of playing the whole movie, there's a scene right after this where they kind of pick on him because he spends 2 weeks in the hole for this stunt, right? So that's in total isolation in a dark room with no lights and square box, no bed, no luxury, as much as you can have luxuries in prison, but it's nothing, it's bare bones. And that's your punishment. And so one of the prisoners kind of jokes with him and says something like, were you able to take that with you? Meaning, was he able to take the records with him, with the record player down to the hole? Well, of course the answer is no. But Andy says, no, it's in here, and points to his head, and in here, and points to his heart, right. Which also I think lends itself to the power of, if you're an opera lover, you're an opera lover, and it lives in your soul, and you recognize it. And I know you're going to set up the clip about the official opera scene, but just what opera is this from, just so that folks can, and we can repeat it later, but
Right.
Folks are probably like, what opera is it?
Okay. Well, just, you know, regarding that particular duet and the effect it has in that movie, I mean, it's what Morgan Freeman says there. It sort of doesn't matter what they're saying, right?
Yeah.
Because in some way it's so beautiful that it's not necessary to understand what they're saying. But ironically, in the original opera, this scene is not about freedom, it's about setting a trap. So so I mean, I think what I'm going to do is actually, I'm just going to read some prepared notes that I have, because this opera this is called The Marriage of Figaro, and it's by Mozart. And it's based on a satirical French farce. And so farce is kind of chaotic, right? It's like, it's an upstairs downstairs comedy, and it's set in Seville in Spain. And it is written just before the French Revolution. So this is the time when the aristocracy is starting to get challenged, right? And in the story, there's a valet named Figaro. And he is, the story all revolves around him outsmarting his master, the Count Almaviva. And in doing so, this story points out that there's a lot of hypocrisy, and a lot of a double standard going on with the upper classes at the time. So in this actual opera, as I said, there's a lot of comedy. It's a comedy, right? But this lovely moment stands out, and just kind of everything just kind of stops. And so just to set it up a little bit, the wife of the Count, the Countess Rosina Almaviva, is upset with her husband, the Count, because he's been philandering and not faithful to her. So currently he has his eye on her maid named Susanna. Now Susanna is about to marry the Count's valet Figaro, and the Count secretly wants to exercise something called the droit du seigneur, or the right of the lord, which was a supposedly feudal right for a nobleman to have sex with a social subordinate on her wedding night, if you can believe it. So this is, you know, this is not cool, right? But it's all part of the comedy here. And in this duet, the Countess and her maid Susanna are setting up a trap. They're scheming to catch the Count out. So they're composing a letter. So when you hear this duet, the Countess is reciting something, and Susanna, as she writes it down, is repeating it back to her. And so there's that sort of echoing going on in the melody that you'll hear. So it's supposed to be an invitation from Susanna to the Count for a little tryst in a wooded grove. But it is in fact designed to expose the Count's infidelity. The Countess is going to be disguised as Susanna, like in farce, everybody's disguised, right? Nobody can tell who anybody is. And in the darkness, he's going to make a pass at his own wife dressed as Susanna. And everybody in the household is of course on hand to witness this. So
what I think, what I think about is that the song, and it's not an opera song, you know, the if you like pina coladas,
yeah,
and get where the guy, you know, solicits, you know,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
right.
He's looking for a date in a magazine or a newspaper or whatever, and he catches his own wife.
That's
right?
So, mistaken identity, right? And
this is you know, when we talk about when I worked in the movie industry, we used to talk about the fact that there are really only like, I think it's 7 or 9 something, but there's like 9 plot lines that exist on the planet. And you start to see them repeated over and over and over and over again, throughout history, throughout time. And so some of them are like apocalyptic, and, you know, so there's these themes that resonate with the human experience. And so again, what it does for me around the discussion of opera is it humanizes it for me. Exactly. It's like, it's a familiar story.
That's right.
And of course, as you rightly pointed out with the scene in the Shawshank Redemption, it's not a comedy, that movie. So it makes me want, like, I kind of wish I had the creative team to try and understand why the choice of that particular piece, because obviously they're saying something metaphorically, and maybe in some ways, Andy's looking at his false incarceration as a bit of a comedy of errors, right? Like what's the irony of this, right? Like, so I don't know, maybe there's a little layer of that in there.
Well, as I recall from the movie, he was actually set up by his wife and her lover.
He wasn't set up.
No.
He wasn't set up. But he was drunk and he was mad that she was having an affair. And so it looked like he could have killed her, but it was somebody else that killed her.
Right. So
and him.
There's infidelity in there in any case. Right. Yes. So yes. I think there's a bit of a link there, but mostly I think that this is just such a famous duet, and they just wanted to find something like sublimely beautiful to stop everything in its tracks, just as it does in the opera, stops everything in its tracks, and everybody just gets to sit there and listen to this beautiful thing. And then the madcap comedy resumes, right?
Right. And so as as you're pointing out in the opera, this is a moment, although it's comedic, does it kind of stops the comedy and brings you into this secular moment between these two women.
Well, and also the Countess truly does love her husband. So there is something kind of sad about the fact that she's having to go to all of these extremes to get his attention again and to kind of snap him out of his philandering ways. Because they were this opera is based on a French farce by a guy named Beaumarchais, and he wrote 3 of them, a trilogy. The first one in this trilogy is The Barber of Seville, which is like, the Bunny of Seville, like that's the one we always hear, right? In the cartoons, The Barber of Seville.
Good old Looney Tunes, or
right. And and then there's a third one as well. But in the first one, they're like, it's all about the Count wooing Rosina and their love affair. So in this second opera, it's years later when boredom has set in or whatever, but the Countess still loves her husband and he's being unfaithful. So
I think it's about time, Julia.
Yeah. So Rick, go ahead, and I'll just tell you really quickly, the text is very simple. It says, it's this message, this little letter that's sent, and it says, what a gentle little breeze will wander tonight under the pines in the little grove. And that's it. And then the two ladies look at each other and they'll go, and he'll understand what we mean, what's meant here. The rest he'll understand, that he's supposed to show up. Right. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Rick, go for it.
Oh, that was beautiful. What a difference it makes too when you, for example, you were sharing what the story was, and I don't understand the words because they're in Italian, but I understand the story, and it brings a whole different meaning to it when you listen to it.
And they're just stories, right? That's what opera is. It's stories with music.
We've got a hand from Karim. So Karim, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Julia. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Karim.
Hi. Yeah, and saying about this particular piece from The Marriage of Figaro, although we can't understand what the words are because they're an Italian opera, as Morgan Freeman said, he didn't care what the ladies were singing about, but it sounded like birds in flight, that it was escaping. And then later on, when Morgan Freeman asks the main character, well, why did you play this? What did it do for you? He said, it gave me hope. It's something that these walls can't hold, that the walls of the prison can't hold.
Yeah, that's it right there.
Yeah,
right?
It was the emotion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the Countess and Susanna, even though they're setting a trap, they're trying to access that better nature that they're hoping exists still in the Count, and I think that they're just trying to infuse that into the letter.
Could it also be that she's trying to infuse that she still loves the Count?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't think she would go to all these efforts. I mean, there's a lot of subterfuge going on here.
Unless she wanted to. Yeah, sorry. Unless she wanted to catch the Count that of his infidelity, and then as a sort of a revenge to show him out.
I don't think the idea is not revenge. The idea is to sort of basically shame him into pricking his moral conscience, is to kind of say, look, I'm trying to get your attention here, and we'll forgive you, but I need you to kind of come back to me here and realize. And the thing also in this opera is that not only is he pursuing a lot of other women, but he gets really angry when another episode in the opera is that the Countess, she's not trying to have an affair with anybody else, but the Count assumes, because of other circumstances, that she's cheating on him, and he gets angry, like really, like
double standard,
totally double standard, which is again, Beaumarchais' little dig at the upper classes, there's a double standard here going on, and your behavior, the behavior of the upper classes, the behavior of the Count is just not going to fly, because those that like the valet, Figaro, he's smarter than them, right? The lower classes are just as smart as the upper classes, sometimes more so, and that this is you got to smarten up, right?
Yes, but in that times, marriage in the upper class was not really about love. It was about forming partnerships between families.
That's right.
And power.
But in this case, there's a love story at the heart of it.
That's right. In this case, their relationship is one they kind of have to fight for. So again, in a comic way. So if you get a chance sometime to see the Barber of Seville, that's another opera, but it's written by Rossini, and it's again, it's the one that you hear all of the Figaro, 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 Figaro.
Yes.
that one.
Yes, I was going to ask about that, but you just answered my question.
Yeah. Same playwright, like the opera is based on plays, same playwright, but different composers.
Yes,
Thanks,
I think I've seen both of those.
Awesome. That's great. I'm curious to know how many in this community have seen an opera before. Maybe we'll get it.
We'll get to that a little later, but thank you, Corinne, for your question. We have to move on to the next movie clip, or we're gonna run out of time.
And the answer was 3.
3. I've seen 3. Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, Grim.
Amy, can I just share something about this duet before
Betty,
before you move on?
Yeah.
What it quickly is that 48 years ago, I sang this duet with another person in a concert. So this really brought back memories for me, because I hadn't heard it in a long time. I sang the soprano part, the Susanna part in the duet.
If you stick around through the social, Betty, I'd love it for you to just tease us with a little if you're comfortable. No pressure.
No. That was a long time ago. My voice was very different then.
I hear ya.
Thank you for sharing that, Betty. We're gonna explore our next movie clip, which is the movie Mission Impossible. Now, I'm gonna say that I haven't kept up with all of the Mission Impossibles, so I believe this is the original one. But for all I know, it could be Mission Impossible 39, whatever. But in this movie, it's a little bit of a different setup, because the setting is at the opera. So as we just experienced in the Shawshank, the opera was a part of like the soundtrack of the movie to evoke something in us. And in this case, we're looking at the movie itself, the scene being set at the opera. So we're in the opera. You can imagine everybody's dressed to the nines in their tuxedos and their black tie, and the theater is filled with folks. and the singer is proudly performing. And of course, in the background, spy Ethan is trying to save the opera singer's life. Of course, the opera singer doesn't know his life is in jeopardy, but there are some snipers around the rooms, and the snipers are poised to shoot the opera singer when he hits, like, I don't have the words, so I'm going to say the crescendo, the highest note, the climax moment of the piece, of the aria. And so in the wings of the theater, we hear Ethan fighting bad guys, and some of the spy ops sort of trying to communicate with him about where the snipers are. And what I thought I wanted to share with you all about this was, there's this moment where, you know, Ethan has his sights on like 2 or 3 of I think it's 2 of the snipers, and he goes back and forth, like, which one should I shoot first? Because one of them is going to get this singer, and he has to make a decision about which one to sort of shoot first. And the gun that he uses in order to smuggle it into the opera house is a flute. It's a flute, and you kind of like, you know, take it apart and whatever and put it together, but he sort of looks like he's aiming this flute to shoot folks. And so so that's the scene we're gonna experience. And of course, you know, I don't want to give away the end, but I think you'll figure out whether the opera singer lives or dies, and we'll let Rick play that clip. Very different than what we just witnessed with the Shawshank. So in terms of storytelling in the movies, Julia, I'd love your thought process around I guess what I really love it when there's this juxtaposition between the beautiful opera singing and then like these 2 dudes like beating the living daylights out of each other in the wings of the opera, which as of course you and I with a theater background know that the space is so limited that it's just hilarious. They're like hanging on the fly and it's moving, and you know, it's like totally, anyways, it's a spy movie, right? So
Right.
But let's talk a little bit about the and I recognize we have a hand, so I'll get to that in a moment, but let's just talk a bit about the idea of fight sequences to opera.
Yeah. So well, you know, I mean, yes, you're right. This is a spy movie, and it's totally, you know, kind of a sort of fantasy spy movie. It's a sequence of any fight sequence, I guess, is kind of testosterone driven, let's say. I'm not sure that there's, I to be honest, when fight scenes happen in movies, I just kind of like check out. It's just not something that I care about. Same thing with chases. And I mean, of course, now I don't really see them, but even when I could see them, they weren't interesting to me. But, you know, the choice of this opera and this aria, I think, is very apt because it's such a testosterone driven aria. It is, and I will get into that, talking about the plot of the opera and this aria in particular, but the last line where he sings vincero, right? This is the word vincero, I will win. Right. So this is, you know, what Ethan's gonna do, right?
Right.
He always wins in the
And
end. Right?
yeah, I was gonna say, I think, spoiler alert, the opera singer does not die. He gets to sing that last note. So Ethan has shot the snipers and won the day. Let's take a question from Anthony and then from Megan.
So someone who's been in the opera world, now if that was happening behind you, because it sounded like the opera guy didn't even know this was going on. Is that something, if it was real, would you notice stuff was going on, or are you just in such a zone when you're singing that you wouldn't notice if basically the world is falling apart around you?
So it depends. Like, I mean, for sure somebody would notice that was going on. Like, there's a lot of people backstage in an opera. Like, there's people waiting to come on, there's stage management, there's costume people, there's like, it's very busy backstage. And it's usually, you know, like whatever is up above the stage, which is where they are, is connected to some sort of like set piece. So likely you would perceive it in sets moving around, you know, and things like that. So it's quite silly. But when you're on the stage in an opera, oftentimes they have monitors actually to help you to hear what's going on. So that's it depends. It depends on what is, but certainly I've been on stage and I've heard stuff backstage, like that, you're supposed to be quiet when you're backstage, because the acoustics are good back there too. Nobody wants to hear somebody like tripping over a piece of, a chair or something and knocking down a stand of lights or whatever. Like this happens, right?
Yeah. And you're supposed to be focused on the work.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody is supposed to be focused on the work. And so when you're talking about, I don't know, the party you went to last night, you're not focused on the work.
Yeah. And it's a safety issue too, right? I mean, it's very dangerous backstage.
And oftentimes my experience backstage is that everybody has a place, right? And so you're not just sort of meandering around. You have a spot and you stick to it until you have to get on stage. Then when you come off stage, you go to a specific spot and you stick to it. And that's where you do your costume change, or somebody helps you do something or whatever. Things are happening very quickly, very fast. And so, but your point about them being sort of up on where the fly deck would be, it's a little bit like in this scene, it's like a bridge that connects the upper, like one side of the stage to the other. And somebody would walk along that bridge and maybe, for example, if there was snow falling, that's where the snow would fall from. Or if they had images on the scrim, or the screen at the back, it's called the scrim, they would project them, so they would raise and lower the scrim from there. So it's a very technical place, and there should be some fly guy up there.
That's right.
Or fly gal, but there's a fly person should be up there, managing that. So Megan, let's take your question.
So what was the first clip? The one that had all that opera, like the one that had the figure, like that had what was the first clip? I know the second one was the Mission Impossible. What was the first clip?
The Shawshank Redemption was the movie. What was the name of the duet and
the duet? Well, it's sort of known as the letter duet, but the Italian is like sull'aria, which is the first. Usually the arias are known by the first line of text in that sung in. So it was called sull'aria.
So what what is the movie about? Shawshank?
The Shawshank Redemption. The Shawshank was a prison where people in the 1940s and 50s and later on, but this movie was set in 40s and 50s, went for their crimes, and one of the characters is an innocent man in this prison, and it's about prison life and connectivity, because he makes friends with these prisoners in the most unlikely places. So, and he might escape at the end, but I'll let you watch it to find out.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Megan, for your question.
Yes, you're welcome.
Julia, let's talk about the clip, the aria that you're going to set up for where it's, what play it's from. What world are we entering?
Okay, so this is very different. This is the original opera. Well, the opera is called Turandot, by the way, and the original opera is set in China in ancient times. So Turandot is the heroine, Princess Turandot, and her story is that, for reasons of the historical abuse of her ancestors, her female ancestors by men, that she has declared that she will never marry, and she's sort of the ice princess, right? She's very beautiful but very remote. And so of course she's under tremendous pressure to marry, though, from her father and the court. But she has said that unless she can, suitors can approach her, but unless they can correctly answer her 3 incredibly difficult riddles, they will fail. And to fail in this situation means that they'll actually be executed. So there's a lot of barriers here to her marriage. So if you're going to try to marry, then you have to answer these 3 riddles. If you don't answer them correctly, you die. So in this aria, and by the way, many have tried and failed. So oftentimes there's skeletons around the stage and stuff like that. In this particular aria, in this opera, there is a newcomer to town, a stranger. Now we know his name is Calaf, and he's a prince, but nobody there knows his name. He is just always known as the stranger. So he immediately falls in love with Princess Turandot and accepts the challenge, and actually ends up correctly answering the riddles, which very much upsets her. So wishing to actually have her love him as he loves her, he makes her an offer. He says, I'm a stranger in this land. Nobody knows my name. If you can find out my name before dawn, then I will let you off the hook and I will submit to the penalty of death. So in this aria called Nessun dorma, which means nobody sleeping, you know, he is talking about, well, first of all, sorry, before I say that, when she accepts this deal from him, she forbids anybody in the kingdom to sleep until they find out his name. So that's when he sings. We see him singing this aria, this very famous opera aria called Nessun dorma, nobody is sleeping. And he's basically in the darkness of before dawn, he's talking about his confidence that he will in fact win, and he will win her love. So shall we go ahead and just play that?
I just want to make sure we've got another hand from Megan.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that it's see if Megan has another question before we go on, or whether it's a leftover. Megan, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yes. Is it still with the Mission Impossible, or is it a new video, a new movie clip of it?
So this is the same aria we just experienced in the Mission Impossible, but this is the play of the actual opera. So you're going to hear the same aria again. And that's the pattern for tonight, the movie clip and then the play aria. So we'll play them in pairs so you can hear the difference in the storytelling.
Oh, okay. Okay, I understand.
Okay, yeah. So in this particular clip that I'm going to ask Rick to play in just a second, it's actually from a movie called Yes, Giorgio. So it's, in this case, it's a movie about an opera singer, and that's why he's singing this aria. So it's a different storytelling mode going on here. So this movie featured Pavarotti, and he's singing, we see him singing in a production of Turandot. So can we go ahead and play that, Rick?
Goosebumps. I didn't expect that it would, and I have to tell you, for a moment there, Pavarotti's mouth was open so wide you could almost see to the back of his throat. Like it just, like, I felt like I could see his tongue vibrating and everything. So such a skill that I had never really thought about in any kind of detail, because I'd never been to space to think about it before. So but yeah. Very, very different storytelling in this moment than what we experienced in Mission Impossible.
Yeah, and you know, it's pretty rare that there's a Hollywood movie about an opera singer. Yeah. Or, you know, where an opera singer is actually a character, but that's what happened. Now this movie was kind of a bomb, but you know, in the movie, the story is about his relationship with a woman, and so you get to see him, and then you also get to see her, and you get to see the audience reaction and all the kind of things, which, you know, in a typical staged opera, we wouldn't see those things. But right. Of course, the reaction is kind of interesting to see how the audience reacts to him singing this, because pretty much that's how audiences always react to somebody who sings this aria. And in particular, this was kind of Pavarotti's anthem. You know, like he sang it at the World Cup, he sang it at, you know, the Olympic, like it was just, he didn't actually do this role all that often in, like, as an
actual
opera, right? Yeah. But he sang it a lot in concert, and he was really associated with it. And you can tell why, because I mean, like that last note, I mean, it's ridiculous how long he held it. And I got to tell you, in this movie, like if we'd kept going in the clip, it would have been one of those encore situations where he actually has to sing it again. And the second time he sings it, he holds it even longer. And it's just, that's what we call milking it. But most opera people are like, okay with that.
Can you just explain to me a bit about the technique? I know it's a bit of a tangent, but like how do you train to hold a note like that for that long? Well,
The best singers are very, if they use their breath very efficiently. So it's when you don't have a good technique, that's when you have issues of running out of breath, let's say. So Pavarotti was a consummate singer, like his technique was just kind of perfect, right? And some people criticized him for that because it was almost like it was just about the voice and he wasn't a very good actor. But wow, it's very clean singing. And for sure, you learn how to be aware of your body and the way that the breath is, unhindered, either, when it's coming in and as it's passing through the vocal folds and the vocal cords, and being allowed to resonate everywhere it needs to resonate so that it cuts through the orchestra.
Right. I have known of Pavarotti throughout my life because how do you not, right? Even if you don't go to the opera, like you said, he sings at the Olympics and he sings at the World Cup and he sings at, so there's always spaces where you find yourself hearing something that Pavarotti has done. And I think we have another clip later on that's got Pavarotti in it as well.
That's right.
So that'll be interesting to compare. But I wonder if there's any sort of trivia is not the word I'm looking for, but any like fun facts about this particular opera or this particular genre that you'd like to share with us before we go on to our next movie clip.
Well, it is there's a little of an interesting story because this is written by Giacomo Puccini. Now, Puccini is one of those sort of realistic opera type, usually. Like there's a style of Italian opera called verismo, meaning like realism, more realism. So this one is a bit of a departure in terms of it's more fable-ish, fairy tale-ish, and it's actually based on like an old Persian story, I think. But he was ill when he was composing this, and there's a very famous conductor named Arturo Toscanini who worked with Puccini in writing and producing this at La Scala in Milan, which is the big opera house, famous opera house in Milan. And he had a premonition that he would not live to see this performed, this produced, and it was in the 30s, and Il Duce, what's the Italian dictator, Hitler's friend, Mussolini, actually was invited to come to the opening. That's just on a side note. And because he wanted to have like the fascist anthem played at the opening, and Toscanini wouldn't allow it. So Il Duce did not attend the opening, but that's when we're talking about. It's in the 30s, right? The maybe late 20s. But the unfortunate truth is that that Puccini did not live to see the opening. He, in fact, didn't exactly even finish the last aria. It was finished by someone else. So it's a very, very popular opera, not that easy to put on because you need some really powerful singers. But yeah, unfortunately, Puccini did not live to see that opening. And on the very first night, Toscanini conducted it, and where he finished composing, Toscanini laid down his baton, and the performance was over. And he said, "Here's where the maestro, the composer, died." And that was it for the opening night. Then the next night they played the whole thing.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. I see, like you know everything. Thank you.
I'm old. I've been learning about this stuff for a long time.
Well, there's also a talent, Julia, I must say, of retaining information, because sometimes I find I learn a lot of stuff and then the next day I go, uh-oh, I don't remember what you know what I
Are you
mean? Like,
kidding? I was like Googling everything this afternoon. So
so,
don't ask me tomorrow.
yeah. We've got one more hand from Megan. So let's give Megan an opportunity to ask a question. And then we'll check out our next movie clip. Give Megan a moment to unmute.
There you go.
There we go.
Okay. So what movie clip are we seeing here?
So the movie clip that you saw, and we'll keep this sort of movie to and play, Julia, just so that it makes sense here. The movie clip still was for Mission Impossible. Okay, so we saw the clip of the movie Mission Impossible. This is the tandem clip, same aria, but done by Pavarotti.
Okay. I see what you mean. Yes. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So the next one we'll set up is the same way. So we're gonna transition into talking about the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, which is yeah. See, there you go. So again,
about Queen?
Yeah, about Queen. So I'll set up the movie clip. We'll play the movie clip. We'll talk a little bit about it, and then we'll play the same aria that was played in that movie from the play. Okay. So this is Bohemian Rhapsody. And in this particular clip, the band Queen is waiting in an office to speak to a major record executive. And Freddie Mercury breaks through the front door. He's late, as usual. And they have there's a lot of dialogue in this one. So they have a bit of discussion about creating the next big hit. And Freddie Mercury puts on a record of a particular opera aria and sort of makes a pitch for it being the basis of their next record. So Rick, when you're ready, play that clip. Love that movie. And of course, I'm a big fan of the song Bohemian Rhapsody, which is we could play. Maybe that song will be circulated in our post survey, our post email information, because I think I'd love to hear it again. So we wanted to talk about storytelling and how opera plays into storytelling in this particular movie clip. This, I think, sounds French to me, these singers. So they're French. Okay. And of course, I think, this particular movie is more of a bio-autographical type movie. It's a biography. So part of the importance of this is how the opera genre changed the face of rock and roll and how Queen used it to change the face of rock and roll. So again, this is a completely different way of storytelling and storytelling through music. But what I like about this particular clip is, just like we saw in the Shawshank Redemption, where you have a character talking about the impact of opera, you've got Freddie Mercury talking about how opera impacts his artistic choices. And what it makes him feel. So share with me your thoughts about storytelling in this particular movie.
Well, I mean, I love the sentiments that he, expresses about the risk, let's say, taking a risk of going outside the box, of having it be bigger and grander and joyous and sort of, obviously, rock and roll has its roots and it's got its appeal at that sort of ground level kind of, rock and roll kind of just grounded in the guitars and the drums, right? But I love the idea that they wanted to make something bigger and bolder, and and I'll get into the aria and what it's about and where its context as well. But I can't help but draw a line between Freddie Mercury's personality and Carmen's personality. Wild, unbound, just that to me, that's why they chose that aria. So it's a fantastic, I think it's a fantastic way that they have kind of told that story by actually playing the opera, choosing that opera, and then having Freddie Mercury express his sort of unbridled desire to explore in like almost every possible way.
Yeah, there's this because Bohemian Rhapsody turned into like an iconic anthem, rock opera anthem. That I hesitate to guess that there may even, is there a person on the planet who hasn't heard this or knows of this song? Probably there is, but like it's got real wide reaching, a real wide reaching scope. And so I'm curious, do you consider the song Bohemian Rhapsody to be opera-ish?
Well, I mean, I don't think I've ever analyzed the words for that, and I don't think I've analyzed I mean, what if their intent was to actually tell a story? I'm not really sure, because sometimes it's just all about the sound, right? I think but certainly, I mean, as a vocalist,
hit the nail.
His range, right? He actually sang with opera singers, like he did. What was it? He sang for this Barcelona Olympics. He sang with a very famous Spanish soprano named Montserrat Caballé, and I can't remember what they sang together, but I mean, it's clear Freddie Mercury was about the voice, right? And that's really what opera's about, the voice. So there's certainly a parallel there, and of course, all of the accents and the conventions and the mixing and the harmonies and all that of Bohemian Rhapsody. I mean, it's just big. It's big and grand, just like opera. So for sure. Yeah.
And it was the first time that folks had heard the mixing of these genres in such a pleasing way. And I think again, like what it reminds me of is how opera is kind of, it's always been there, just sort of, like peppered into our social experiences in life, and you almost don't even recognize it when you hear it, because it's packaged in a different way than what you anticipate or expect it to manifest as. So talk to us now about the opera aria that this is, because you said it's from Carmen.
Yes.
So talk a bit about Carmen and the aria and set up what we're gonna.
Okay. So this opera, Carmen, is by a French composer named Georges Bizet. So it's set in Spain, but it's sung in French. And this happens a lot with opera, right? I mean, there are operas set in Scotland, but they're sung in Italian. I mean, it's very, there's even an opera that Puccini wrote that's set in the American West. And, you hear it's kind of an odd thing, because you hear them singing in Italian, and then all of a sudden you'll hear like John Edwards or whatever his name is. And you're like, what? Oh, right. But anyway, in this case, it's set in Spain in around the 1830s. And the opera itself features a love triangle between a beautiful, willful, very sexy, impossibly seductive gypsy woman. Between her, a straight-laced, conventional Spanish officer named Don José, and a rich and famous bullfighter named Escamillo. So, you sort of understand that Escamillo is sort of up to dealing with Carmen. I mean, he's a famous rich guy. He can handle her, but Don José is not exactly equipped. And in this story, he ends up losing his family, his friends, his career, all because of an obsession that he gets around her. And as he becomes more obsessed, he becomes more dangerous. So he continues to kind of hold on to her, but she continues to just kind of keep him at bay and throw him off once she decides on the bullfighter. So the actual aria is sort of known as the habanera, because it has a rhythm of this Spanish dance that's known as the habanera. But the actual aria, the proper name is L'amour est un oiseau rebelle, which it means basically love is a rebellious bird, which is the first line of the aria. And this aria is early on in the opera. It actually introduces the character of Carmen. She is a worker at a cigarette factory. And in this scene, the girls who all work in the factory, they're called the cigarette girls, they go out into the sort of the yard outside for a break. And there's a bunch of men that kind of hang around from the quitter. Sort of, they like to come in and hang out with the girls and flirt and smoke. And but on this particular day, there are also some soldiers that Don José, the officer Don José is responsible for. They've come in and they've kind of joined the gang here in admiring the girls. So Carmen is particularly admired. She's the most beautiful, the most sexy, the most alluring of all of the girls. So Don José at first does not notice Carmen. And that's sort of course, what piques her interest, because she's got everybody else in her sway, but he comes out and he starts reprimanding the soldiers for slacking off. So she's singing this aria to get his attention. She actually just kind of throws this rose at him, or not a rose, but a flower. I think it's a carnation, and then gets his attention, and then boom, the spell is cast. So in this aria that we're about to hear, she sings of her belief that love is only exciting if it's fleeting, if it's unpredictable, if it's lawless. And her belief is that if you pursue love, it will fly away from you. But if you pay no attention to it, it will arrive at your door. So she vows to love whomever she chooses or die. And unfortunately, it's not hard to predict how that story ends. But in any case, let's listen to the aria. And Rick, if you don't mind playing that clip.
All right. So again, very different genre of storytelling in these two particular clips. And folks, again, I want to invite you to chime in at any time if you have questions about opera in general or the clips we're sharing with Julia here in our space. And I'm kind of curious too, if you're a French speaker out there, whether you were able to make out any of the words, because I don't speak French, but I'm just curious about how those who speak the language may be able to understand the words. Julia, are you a French speaker?
No, I mean, I've studied French and I can kind of understand some of it, and I sing in it, but I'm not fluent. Unfortunately, maybe before I die, I will get around to that. But gratefully, because this particular recording, this particular clip that we played is actually from a film version of this opera. So it's not on a stage, it's out probably filmed in Spain. And so the sound is really, really good, even though unfortunately it was a little bit low in this clip, but
the limits of Zoom.
Yeah, but because they were able to really spend time on the sound, the diction should be really clear. So a lot of it should be understandable.
Mm-hmm. We have another hand from Megan. Give Megan a second to unmute. Megan may be having a little trouble unmuting. So while we're waiting for Megan, I wonder, Julia, about the length of an aria.
Okay.
Oh, we've got Megan.
Yes. So you're talking about a film that actually was made in Spain. What was that called?
Well, I mean, the film was the film version of the opera Carmen. And
Carmen it was. Okay.
Yeah. So in fact, there was a director whose name escapes me right now, unfortunately. Maybe somebody out there knows, who did actually make a number of film versions of operas that are very good, including this one, also La Traviata, Otello, which is the Shakespeare the
Oh, I've got that one. Yeah, I've got
opera
that one.
version of Othello of
Oh.
Shakespeare, you know.
Yeah, I got that one.
So they're beautifully shot. Just like the cinematography alone is incredible. But of course the performances are also very good. And in some way they're a little bit easier to take because they've been cut a little bit, just to stay within a certain time, and sometimes it would just make sense to cut certain parts if you're not seeing it on stage. So yeah, no, they're these films are beautiful to see, and I don't know if there are any that out there that are described, but they are well worth checking out.
Not that I'm aware of. It was, some of these look like they were filmed also in a time where description wasn't
a thing.
well, it was a thing, but just wasn't as big a thing as it is now.
Yeah.
And even now, as we know, there are gaps. We'll say gaps.
Oh, for
but
sure.
That's a conversation for another day.
Unfortunately, yeah.
There's something in the chat here about who do we know who the actor, the actress, or the opera singer is in this particular Carmen film?
Yeah, so this is her name is Julia McGinnis Johnson.
Aha.
And she actually so this role of Carmen, it was written for a vocal type, a lower female voice called a mezzo soprano. Julia McGinnis Johnson was not cast as a mezzo. She's actually a soprano. In fact, she has really, really high notes. So she's more of a higher soprano normally, but she has the right look and she's a very good actress. And so she was cast in this to be, to make it a better cinematic experience.
How does that change the aria, or does it?
Well, so there are a couple of considerations usually when it comes to voice types, and so a mezzo soprano, for good or ill, is usually associated with a more earthy sound, which translates into that character, right? That is generally more, less say, or sort of angelic and pure, or whatever, let's say. So Carmen tends to be representative, let's say, of that genre of mezzo soprano, but also it tends to be with a particular voice where the heft of it is, like where the real meat of the voice is, so that then the sound carries properly and it's written in a correct range, so that you can sing it basically so that it projects in an opera house. Now, in film, they can play around with balance and with volume levels, so that even if she doesn't have as much of that voice down low, it doesn't really matter, because they can make sure that she's heard. So oftentimes it's really all about being audible.
Okay, appreciate that. We have a hand from Myra. Give Myra a moment to unmute.
Okay.
Yeah, awesome, gotcha.
You got me, but I had the same question, and I can't get my hand down.
Oh, we will make sure we can lower the hand for you, Myra. No problem. That's awesome. I love it. I love it. The magic of Zoom, right?
No, it's interesting because those voice type associations, they're really interesting, and composers really, they did have their preferences. Tenors tended to be those are the higher voiced male singers, like Pavarotti. They tended to be the lovers. They tended to be the the philanderers and the or the heroes, let's say, often. And the villains tended to be the lower voiced, baritones and basses. And sometimes they were also the lovers, but it was definitely, composers had their presets. They sort of knew what the audiences expected. Sopranos, oftentimes the very high voice sopranos, ended up being sort of vulnerable, fragile, bordering on crazy sometimes. There's a whole show we could do on different voice types and their associations with characters. So
stay tuned. It could be a little bit of foreshadowing. I'd love to give you an opportunity, Julia, again, to share if there are any sort of fun facts about the opera Carmen or things that you want to share, impart on the audience before we.
Well, I will tell you, the opera was kind of shocking when it came out. Okay, so it was presented at there are two opera houses. There were two opera houses in Paris where it premiered. One was the Paris Opera, which was the very grand sort of the big shows with big themes. The Opéra Comique, which basically means the comic opera, doesn't mean that everything was comic that was presented, but was the other opera house, where it was usually tended to be a little bit more, say, PG, a little bit more fun, a little bit lighter. And most of the time, even it was more like a musical, because between the arias, the action, the words that were not just, say, an aria is like a soliloquy, and it refers, it allows the character a moment to reflect on their own feelings. It doesn't necessarily drive the action forward. So those parts in typical opera are called recitative, and it's like sung. But the word recitative comes from to recite. So in grand opera, that's sung as well. But in this type of opera comique setting, a lot of times that was spoken. So it was more like a traditional musical that we know. So this particular opera, though, which was based on a book, I don't want to give all the plot points away, but there's a lot of heavy stuff that goes down. There's infidelity, there's breaking the law, there's like a lot of non-PG stuff. So it's an original reception was lukewarm at best. And unfortunately, Bizet also died young. He died before this opera became sort of a mainstay in opera houses. So it took a few years, but after a while, people began to really recognize it for all of its wonderful moments, its incredible rhythmic intensity, beautiful melodies, colors, the orchestration, just the opportunities for the drama. It's a fantastic work, but he didn't unfortunately live to see its success. So that's a little sad.
What did he die of? Do you know? I always want to just say consumption.
Well, and it could have been, I have a feeling it was cancer. But oftentimes composers were dying of
respiratory diseases.
Well, those kinds of things are also sexually transmitted diseases.
Yeah.
Syphilis and things like that, right? So it was not the artist has always lived a bit on the fringes of society, and this particular opera was a little bit too fringe for Paris society at that time, but it has since become recognized for how great it is.
When we were sharing some stuff about opera earlier before we invited our audience into the space, when I heard this one, I was like, oh, I remember another movie, and I throw this out to folks. If you've ever seen Train Spotting, which is a movie, very heavy stuff as well, but largely a movie about heavy drug use. And this aria in particular is played to the a drug-induced psychosis, basically, of one of the characters. And so, again, very different than the storytelling that we're talking about with the play Carmen itself. But then again, as you talked about Carmen being sort of like wild and free and a little bit on edgy, that kind of stuff. Maybe there is some kind of parallel there between,
and it's interesting. Oftentimes, I've noticed that it seems to be used in other movies to kind of give a sense of bewilderment almost at the situation. It's like it doesn't it doesn't line up all the time. It's sort of almost comic that like, that whatever's happening is maybe not supposed to be happening just the way it does. So I don't know.
Yeah. There's a huge long question here from Anthony, and I don't want to go through the whole thing, but basically he's asking about what makes an opera production so expensive. Do they ever use microphones in like modern opera houses?
Yeah.
Kinds of things.
Well, opera's always been expensive. There's huge forces in an opera. If you think about it, it's not just the people you see on the stage, and there's oftentimes a lot of those. Like there's main characters plus a chorus, and in the previous generations, there were oftentimes also ballets in the middle of operas, which may or may not have helped with the story. It was just sort of an extra thing they threw in. But there's also the whole orchestra that's in the pit that you don't really pay attention to, right? So there's a lot of people involved. Then there's the whole production staff. Then there's, in modern times, everything's union, and including the production people and the stage crew. And then there's the renting of the space and all the rest of it. So, there's a lot of salaries to pay. And can't remember what the other question was. There was
About microphones, if microphones are used in modern opera houses.
They're not. If you see a microphone there, it may be that they're recording it, but most of the time opera is not mic'd. Now, that being said, if it's a very big opera house and there's a very famous singer, say with a sort of a small-ish but very beautiful voice, let's say, then they may add that in. But nobody really wants to admit to that.
Mhm.
It's one of those kind of little secret things that seems to happen. Yeah. And I
doesn't feel genuine to the whole artistic practice of the opera singing.
Yeah, well, they do try to cast people according to the situation, the circumstances, but sometimes it's just like anything else. If there's star power there, if they have a very pretty and very popular soprano, the Met, which is a huge opera house, they have done that. They've brought her in, but they've mic'd her. So, but again, it's not something that anybody likes to talk about.
And I wonder if that happens too in terms of just modern day singers that are doing opera on a stage. And I can't really think of one at the moment, but I keep thinking about, her name is escaping me, the teeny tiny petite blonde.
The one that's on TV and stuff.
Yeah.
Kirsten something?
Kristen Chenoweth, maybe?
Right. Yeah.
Who is an opera singer, but like is sort of like, like has a foot in both worlds of sort of modern pop stuff and opera and musical theater. And so there may be opportunities where that might be a thing. I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I don't know how much opera she sings. I think she tends to do music theater, but there is that sort of little genre that's kind of half music theater, half opera.
Yes.
Like Leonard Bernstein wrote a lot of those, like West Side Story or Candide. And they're sort of, they've got a foot in both worlds.
All right, we're gonna play our last movie clip. So this again will be a two-hander, right? So this is the movie The Family Man, and it's a bit of a I love this movie. It's a Nick Cage movie, and it's the rich man that wakes up one morning and finds himself on a life path that he didn't take. So it's a little bit like Miracle on 34th Street, where it's like, if you didn't exist, you're watching yourself live this life. And of course, this life that he's living is just a blue collar, like tire salesman. He's not a rich Wall Street guy, but he married for love and he has a family that he loves. And so it's this juxtaposition between these sort of the life he lives and the life he could have lived, and whether he gets to have that life. So in this particular clip, it's the opening of the movie. And so we've got Nick Cage, who plays a character named Jack. He's a middle-aged man, and he's literally dancing around his very expensive, fancy, high-rise New York penthouse apartment. And he's dancing around in his tight black underwear, singing this opera aria that we're going to witness in a second. And as he dances around his apartment, he opens this opulent closet, which is bigger than the house I live in, basically. And it's full of designer suits. And so he goes through his closet and he's like picking out his outfit for the day, and he picks a jacket, and he picks a shirt and all that kind of stuff. And there's this lovely moment, and you'll hear it audibly, where he actually strums an air guitar to the opera, but he does this like thing with his voice where you know that he's like just totally into ripping this sound, right? And so he's playing an air guitar in that moment. And then we quickly transition into him fully dressed into an elevator, and a woman enters, and she's an older woman dressed like, again, a rich woman, totally decked out in her furs. I think she's got like a little dog in her hand. So he lives in a building full of rich people. He has an exchange with her, and as he leaves the elevator, he has a quick exchange with the concierge of his apartment building before he heads to work. So that's the setup for this particular clip. And Rick, when you're ready, please play that clip of the Family Man. Okay, so that was a clip from The Family Man, and you kind of get this whole arrogant attitude that's coming from this Wall Street rich dude. He's arrogant. And what's funny about this clip for me is, for folks who don't have the ability to see it, I've seen this movie a million times before I lost my sight even. His closet of designer suits like he's got this line of jackets and then a line of shirts. Like it's all very well organized, almost like a store. But they all seem to be the same. So what's funny to me is it's like he's looking at what suit jacket, but they're all black suit jackets. It's like, pick one. It doesn't matter which one. They're all the same. So there's kind of this comedic thing layered on top of the arrogance of this human being. So again, let's just talk a little bit about the storytelling of how the opera clip is used in this particular movie.
Right. So, I mean, this is a really well-known aria, and again, it's a tenor aria. It's the lover. I would say it is, kind of testosterone driven, and which is his character all over. And this character is obviously motivated by wealth and power, and that is what he chose, right? And that is the world in which he lives. And I guess the movie wants to establish him very, very quickly by referencing this aria, which, when I get to telling you about the actual aria, is very much in line with that characterization in the opera and in this movie.
So how interesting is that the other clips that we saw, the other movie clips, so Shawshank Redemption and Bohemian Rhapsody in particular, there was a juxtaposition between the context of the story of the aria and the story of the movie, right? Like, again, we talked about the Shawshank, and this is different. It's very, very different. Whereas this particular film, the aria is in line with the character, and the character uses this aria a bit, like, obviously he knows it.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a power anthem for him. It's like, I'm going to start my day, and I am the king of kings.
It's me. I'm the guy.
I'm the guy, right? So that really, really exudes that sort of arrogant confidence, that the setting up of who this character is. Now, I didn't know anything about this particular aria, so I wouldn't have known that it was very much related to this particular character. So I appreciate that context, because it changes for me the movie.
Yeah.
It changes for me how I feel about the movie.
Yeah. And I mean, it is a really, really well-known aria, but it isn't it doesn't always transmit what it's about. You know what I mean? It's that it's hummable. It's very recognizable. And in fact, there's a little story about how Giuseppe Verdi, who was the composer, how he actually withheld this aria before the premiere from the singer, because he knew that this particular guy would go around the streets of town humming this tune, and he didn't want it to get out for the organ grinders to start playing before the opera actually opened. So, by the way, Giuseppe Verdi means Joe Green in English, just so you know. It sounds kind of fancy, but it means Joe Green.
And it's I have Giuseppe's in my family. It's an Italian thing.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
In fact, my family owns a restaurant in Calgary called Giuseppe's.
Oh,
okay, so there you go. So after my uncle Giuseppe. I don't have to say it anymore, but I like to. So yeah, right. We're in this world where we're establishing this human being that nobody really wants to be around, but he is.
Well, he's energetic.
In his own world, yeah.
Yeah, he's energetic. He's got drive. He's got ambition, and I think that is all transmitted in the music. Now, the text, the title of it is La Donna è mobile, which means women are like fickle. So the irony of that is that, in fact, he is cynically describing women as being the ones that are fickle and unfaithful, when in fact it's the other way around, right? And that's very quickly established in the movie and in the opera as well.
So let's talk a bit about the opera.
Right.
What year?
Okay.
All those kinds of things.
Yeah. So I don't actually think I have the year when it actually came out, but it's set in the 16th century. And just very quickly, I mean, when it was written, which would have been, somewhere in like the late 1800s, Italy wasn't a country yet, right? It was just a series of city-states still, ruled over by another empire, right? So there was a lot of nationalism, and Italians wanted to be a city, or maybe not country. They wanted to throw off the empire. So there was a lot of political, disturbance, let's say. So whenever composers put on, or anybody put anything on stage, it always had to go through the censors. And so this particular story is a bit, rebellious. And it was not allowed to be set as a contemporary story. It had to be set somewhere else in a time long, long ago, or else the censors would not approve it because it was too revolutionary, let's say. So it's based on a Victor Hugo novel, loosely, called Le Roi s'amuse, or The King is Amusing Himself, right? So it's, again, the same theme of the aristocracy abusing its privileges. And it centers around the story of Rigoletto, who is a wisecracking court jester in the court of the Duke of Mantua. And the Duke has used his position of power to have a lot of affairs with most of the wives of his courtiers, which is, that's what he was able to do it, so he did it. And nobody really liked him for it, but they were too afraid of him to do anything about it. So Rigoletto, who is his court jester, though, his job is to entertain everybody. So he's kind of cruel, like merciless in how many jokes he makes at the expense of these courtiers. He makes fun of the fact that the Duke has slept with their wives, right? And they despise him. So one of them actually goes so far, after Rigoletto makes a joke on his at his expense, he actually goes so far as to curse Rigoletto, which terrifies Rigoletto, and it actually sets the tragedy of the whole story in motion. And the Duke ends up seducing Rigoletto's sort of secret daughter. He has a daughter that he's kind of kept hidden from everybody because he knew that she might actually, be taken advantage of. And so the Duke discovers her and seduces her, this young innocent daughter of Rigoletto. And of course, Rigoletto, when he finds out, he swears revenge. And in this particular aria, Rigoletto takes his daughter, who is very much in love with the Duke, and shows her the Duke doing what the Duke does, seducing another woman. And he takes her in disguise and arranges for her to see this happening in this sort of inn out of town, this little hostel kind of an inn. And Gilda, then his daughter, is so in love with him that she remains faithful to her love for him. And the unfolding of the curse on Rigoletto sort of turns on her loyalty to him, and then also on Rigoletto's scheme to avenge her, and that vengeance backfires. So again, the aria is about sort of the fickleness of women, but he's a pretty sleazy character, really, and so it becomes quite ironic, really. So shall we take a listen?
Yeah, but before you do that, just remind me, is it Rigoletto that is singing this aria, or is it the Duke that's singing this aria?
Sorry, I should say, this is the Duke of Mantua, singing this aria about women in general, as he's seducing, woman number 500 or whatever. Right?
Gotcha.
Okay.
All right. Context is everything.
Go for it, Rick.
Again, with the holding of that high note at the end, right? Holy doodle.
Kind of a Pavarotti thing. I can do
Kind
it,
of a
so I
Pavarotti
will.
thing. I can see the reference that you made earlier to Pavarotti being like a great singer, but maybe not a great actor.
Yeah.
And how he was kind of ridiculed for that. But it's like, at the end of the day, you're like, I don't even care if he's not a good actor, because how many people can do that?
It's true. And I mean, there are just so many people that try to sing it, and maybe they're good actors, but there's a discomfort. If they can't sing it well, if they're not comfortable, there's just only so good an actor you can be. So, and
then we're not comfortable too, right?
Exactly.
Like, they're not comfortable, we're not comfortable listening to it. So
Mm-hmm.
again, we're talking about storytelling. We're talking about I like this piece because in the beginning, again, it's a little, I don't know, it's a little bit like the Ghost of Christmas Past, but it's like, the father talking to his daughter, and then he takes her over to a window, and she's watching the Duke woo other women, or another woman in this case, and she, I think, is devastated by that, even though she loves him deeply. So
she really does. Boy, I mean, again, I don't want to give away the ending, but poor Gilda.
Poor Gilda. Well, now I kind of want to know, because I don't think these movies will ever be described, so I may not be able to figure out visually what the ending is. Does she get her man?
Well, let's just say that she takes one for the Duke, and that she ends up taking the bullet, as it were, that was meant for the Duke, that was fired by her father. So it's quite tragic.
It is. That is quite tragic. I didn't see that coming, I have to be honest.
Yeah, no, she's as loyal as the day is long.
Mm-hmm. And sorry, what was the name of this opera again?
It's Rigoletto. Just Rigoletto.
It is Rigoletto. Okay.
Yeah.
I love it, and understanding the story of the opera makes me more inclined to engage with the opera in a different way. Like, this is just the story of the a part of the aria, but it gives you a bigger sense of the whole.
Yeah, and we're so used to realism.
Yeah.
And I think with opera, you just have to enter through the door that is, I love singing, and I love voices, and I love big stories. And then the other stuff that doesn't necessarily wash with realism, we just let that go.
Yeah. Again, I'm going to give you the opportunity to talk about things about this particular play that are maybe interesting facts, or stuff that you want to share with us that is just,
well, I
on a
think-
nose?
Yeah, I think I kind of gave away my little story there where I talked about him keeping the song from the tenor because he knew that that the guy would it would be a spoiler, you know what I mean? He'd go around, the tenor would go around humming it and singing it, and because Verdi was a hugely popular composer, and it was one of those things where when he died, everything stopped, like that his funeral was a massive event. So and he is very much associated with the drive for the independence and the creation of the Italian state. So he was definitely part of that process.
I can tell you that I have heard this particular aria, and folks may recognize this easily, in just about every frozen pizza commercial that's ever existed on television, right? Whether there's two people at a table in front of a pizza with a candlelight and they gaze in each other's eyes and whatever it is.
It's like Italy distilled. You know what I mean? Like it's, totally.
It is. It's like, it invokes everything that is Italy in a moment. So that's quite funny. I actually think there is a brand of frozen pizza called Giuseppe that plays this particular aria.
I mean, it's been used for so many commercials, and it's so recognizable, that it's, like I said, it's just Italy in a bottle.
But it does, when I hear just the music itself, it does make me feel like I want to go visit the country. It does make me feel like I want to be in this like authentic sort of vintage town with rustic tables and cobblestone stone streets, and where pizza. I just saw a great documentary actually on pizza from Napoli, and how it actually. Here's a fun fact for you, an Italian fun fact about pizza, which is because of cholera, they started frying the dough in oil because water was poisonous. And so they used to put the pizza fillings in the dough, fold it like a pocket and throw it in oil, kind of like a calzone, and fry them on the streets. And that was what didn't kill people, because water was killing people. Because
you drink your wine, you have your wine because that's
right.
Your pizza.
But that is, I mean, when you look at history, like somebody from England once told me that, the reason they drink beer so much was because water was contaminated. Absolutely. And so beer was like the thing. So it's the same in Italy with wine. Anyway, so I just thought that was super interesting, because now you can find all through Napoli and maybe other parts of Italy as well, these little sort of like sunken holes in old rock buildings where there's literally like an Italian grandmother frying dough in a, you know what I mean? It's like a shanty almost, but everybody goes there to buy their local pizza or their pizza pocket or whatever it is. And they're like, I just want to go. I just want to go. I want to go. So
this song evokes fun. I think it's got a waltz tempo, right? Chuck, 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 chuck. It's bouncy, it's fun, and but it has this kind of this sort of nastiness going on below ground, right? Subterranean kind of nastiness. So it's brilliant.
Yeah. We have one final clip to share with folks, and this is completely different than what we have shared. And okay, I think maybe we should set it up. I was gonna tease it, but this is Andrea Bocelli. And of course, those of us in the blind community may be familiar with the fact that Bocelli is a blind opera singer, but the difference here is that he is using a microphone. And I think what we'll do is it's a concert setting. So we'll leave it at that and we'll unpack it afterward. So Rick, when you're ready, can you please play the Andrea Bocelli clip? And it's an aria we've already heard tonight. Spoiler. Okay, so again, your point well taken about the rising applause of the audience that seems to happen after all of these moments.
Yeah, it's just one of those, it kind of gets you every time, right?
Yeah. And Andrea Bocelli's always been one of my favorites. In fact, I didn't realize until we were thinking about doing this opera stuff that I have some Andrea Bocelli on my my iTunes, because I like what he does. But this is kind of where we talk about because he's mic'd, because he's in. So I want to let you talk about this, the difference between being in this setting as opposed to being in the opera itself.
Well, this big difference is that it's I believe it's kind of a stadium show. I think it's not in an acoustically friendly environment, just like an opera house. It looked like it, there was a huge crowd there, from what I could hear. And then there's, of course, the orchestra's on stage with him, as opposed to being under the stage in the orchestra pit. So, and it was huge. I mean, there were, and I believe that in this particular situation, it's an arrangement. They've added stuff on the end. Sounded to me like they'd maybe even added a few more trumpets and, some extra stuff to give it some oomph, like it needed more oomph, but it's meant to really inspire a reaction, and of course it does. So, but it would be pretty much impossible in that situation for him to compete with those forces without a microphone. So that's fair enough. That's great.
Yeah. It's like playing in an amphitheater, right?
Yeah.
There was a question in the chat asking whether Andrea Bocelli was born blind. So of course I went to the Google machine, and here's what they say: born on September the 22nd, 1958. I have to tell you all, that's exactly my father's birthday, September 22nd, 1958. So I have to tell him that. Anyways, he was diagnosed with congenital glaucoma at the age of 5 months, and then lost all of his sight at the age of 12. So there you go. It's actually a bit of both, right? Born with the congenital condition, but had likely 12 years of low vision before losing it to glaucoma. So there's your Andrea Bocelli History 101.
Yeah. I'm so glad that he's been able to make a career that way, because he has a beautiful voice, and I know that he has done a little bit of work on stage as within the context of an opera, but mostly he does concert work, and that's fantastic. I mean,
It's
he does a
probably
great
because
job.
it's more accessible for him.
Yep,
to be able to do that, and he does he doesn't move.
No.
Whereas Pavarotti has arm expression and facial expressions that are bigger than just the technical stuff, the technical singing stuff. Like he's very expressive with his eyes, and whereas Bocelli is not much to look at physically in terms of his expressiveness, right? And I think a lot of that goes back to some of the things that we're told as blind people, especially when you lose your sight. I mean, I was in a doctor's office recently with a 5-year-old blind boy, and he was crawling all over me. He was crawling like he was exploring me, and I was like, okay, and his mother told me that now this is a choice every parent needs to make, right? His sighted mother told me that she refuses to put him in the box and tell him to stand still, because that's oftentimes what blind kids were told, was like, if you don't know like where your arms are flailing and you don't have an idea of spatial awareness, to just stand still. And so oftentimes folks end up kind of being statuesque, and because you don't get the privilege of being able to see body language in other people to know that I'm speaking with my hands right now, right? That's something that folks do to be expressive. So she was not going to allow her kid to not be expressive. And I thought, well, that's a little bit of it's an interesting boundary, because in the meantime, he's crawling in the lap of a stranger, and I didn't see it coming. So all of a sudden this 5-year-old's crawling on me like I'm his grandmother. And I was like, nope, we don't know each other, actually.
Exploring his world.
Yes. Yes. So, and he had a very interesting name, and I don't want to share it because folks may know who this young man is, but had a very interesting name. Anyways, so yeah, I appreciate very much what Bocelli has been able to do, because again, I think that putting these arias or opera in this setting also tends to make it accessible in a way.
It bridges a gap. There's something about it that because people often like this kind of music. I mean, there's the 3 tenors, and then there's the 3 Canadian tenors, and then there's like there's something about the music that the people really like, and just for whatever reason, you know, haven't found their way, say, to an actual opera, but they do like the music. And I think the hats off to anybody who puts that out there and puts their artistry and their music and their voice out there and invites people in. It's really
Julia, in our last few minutes together, again, I welcome folks in the audience to ask questions if they have questions, but this is really an opportunity for you to just share some stuff with you. Because again, with us, because again, I don't you know, I don't know enough about opera to maybe ask the most articulate questions. I just know what question marks I have floating in my head, but I wonder if you've got some, you know, some things that you can share with us that just makes the entry point feel like not so intimidating. If you want to get into exploring it, how do we start?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we start by knowing that we already sort of know some stuff that we maybe didn't even really realize that we knew. And secondly, I mean, of course, it would help if we could get more opera described. And I think that people are working on that. So hopefully going forward, there will be more opportunities, not only to go to the opera and be able to follow what's going on, but also that there will be more stuff in these kinds of settings, virtual settings. I think that most theater and opera companies will go forward with some kind of blended format where their stuff presented. So again, opera is really, you know, it's storytelling, but it's through that door of the voice. So if you like singing, if you like singers, if you like the sort of full body expression of the voice, right? You know, some people don't like that for whatever reason. It's just it just kind of, I don't know, it's too much, maybe just too much. But if you understand that, you know, each and every one of us has our own instrument, you know, we are carrying around an instrument, and people think they can't sing maybe, but everybody can sing. And whether or not you think you have a beautiful voice or not, you know, it is a wonderful experience to sing. It's good for us. And in fact, recently, one of our community, who I think is here tonight, Carol, sent me a little blurb about how the English National Opera is helping with long COVID sufferers by giving lessons in breathing and vocal technique over Zoom to people who have struggled to breathe and who are suffering from the anxiety that comes with not being able to breathe over a long period of time. And it's helping. It's helping them. So the voice is such a powerful thing. And especially for people, I think, like, you know, like us, let's say, who may struggle with anxiety and who may struggle with perhaps not having a voice on a, you know, on a larger scale, let's say, that to know that you own your own voice and that you can sing, you can learn how to use music and the act of singing and the act of breathing to find calm, to lessen anxiety and to enjoy life more. I mean, I think it's just such a powerful thing. And going to the opera is nice too, but it's, you know, I just think it's important to realize how much we can do ourselves to enjoy singing and the voice.
I love that. I think I'm gonna have to learn. I'm gonna have to learn the one that Nick Cage sings and make it become my power anthem.
Right on.
Even though it's a little disparaging to women, I might have to change the narrative around that.
Sing
it in the shower, yeah, as I get dressed in the morning. So and I get to learn a little Italian, maybe, you know.
There you go.
Which is my heritage, and I don't know anything other than Giuseppe and Capiche.
I'm sure that it will roll right off your tongue.
Roll. Yes. I love it. Well, we still have folks on the line with us, Julia. I think we should do our draw tonight.
Alrighty.
And I know you know how that works, but I'm going to bring Donna out, And I don't know if you got a slogan that you want to yell out, Julia, instead of stop. Stop seems so boring in the arts world, but we could
why don't we
yell
just say
opera, or you can
bravo?
Okay, you can surprise us. So Donna has got all of the names of our eligible friends in a container of some sort. And
There it is.
what kind of container is it, Donna?
My bike helmet.
Your bike helmet. I love it. I love it. So Donna and Julia, I'm going to leave you in each other's hands.
Okay, Donna, you ready?
All right. I'm shuffling. Go ahead.
All right. Bravo.
Ooh. Sherry.
Sherry.
I'm just gonna double check because I heard someone leave just as we were doing this.
All right. Was it Sherry?
It was Sherry, but it was as we were.
Oh, that
I am
doesn't count.
Oh,
It doesn't count.
doesn't?
You have to
Oh.
be here. No, you got to be here.
okay. All right.
Sherry's loss
you
is
said
somebody
it. All
else's
right.
gain.
Julia, you get to go again.
Oh, okay. Here we go. And bravo.
Carol.
Carol, congratulations, Carol. We'll connect with you, Carol, offline to make sure that we can get you your raffle prize.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful program.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join. And with that, I always say to folks, first off, thank you, Julia, for being on this side of the camera. And we hope to see more of you. And folks, if you have questions for Julia, she's always here on a Wednesday night anyways, but let's continue this conversation because I think it's super interesting to be able to just, learn a little bit at a time so that when I actually get my butt in an opera seat, I can feel like I belong there. So thanks so much, Julia, for spending time with us. And folks, if you want to remain on the line and just do a little social for another 10 minutes or so, we'll keep the lines open and have some chit chat before we say goodnight. And thanks again to folks who've joined us from the future.
Thanks, guys.